Explicit sequence is the shortcut sequence. It's the one that makes sense. I believe when we left off yesterday, I had actually written the formula for those sequences, and we had decided that because we're multiplying by the same number over and over and over again, that means that that's a geometric sequence because we're multiplying by -5 each time. So that means that the common ratio is 5. If you need the sequence again. Sorry, there we go. Thank you for your patience, guys. All right, so because we're multiplying by the same number over and over and over again, we determined that was a -5. That common ratio was a -5. And that meant that that was a geometric sequence. So just the generic geometric sequence is G sub n is equal to the first term in your sequence times whatever your common ratio is, raised to an exponent of n minus 1. Some of you guys, when you were writing your n minus 1 on these formulas, you're writing it kind of big. Make sure you're noting that that's a little exponent. So for writing the explicit formula for this particular one, we're going to take the generic formula and we're going to fill in the blanks with the information we've got. Okay, so our G sub 1, our first term in the sequence, is a 2. So we're going to multiply that by our common ratio, which in this case is that -5 that we had gotten. And we're raising it to the n minus 1. It didn't ask us for a specific term in the sequence. So because it didn't ask us for a specific term, we're just going to leave that as a n minus 1. So the formula for this particular sequence would be 2 times -5. Sorry, I got 2 negatives in there. Raised to the n minus 1. See, it's always times the common ratio. Raised to the n minus 1. And I'm going to fill in that common ratio with a -5. So that's where I got all those pieces of information. First term, and then the common ratio. That's kind of a messy 5, isn't it? All right, B is not a explicit formula. Or I'm sorry, is not a geometric formula. Now, I know these decimals mess with us. I know they do sometimes. How can you go through and try to figure out, without just sitting there and staring at it, what can you do with that calculator you will have in your hands that you're allowed to use to help you figure out whether it's geometric or arithmetic? So how did you figure out what that number was in between, though? Well, what could we do? So put in your calculator and let's start off and so just try subtracting. Exactly. So remember we did 5.6. What I'm doing out to the side right now, you guys don't necessarily have to do. It's just to help you figure out what the heck is that what is it? I don't know, because I'm not very good at math in my head, so I got to test it. So if I got a -7. Okay. So then if I do -1.4 and subtract 5.6, look, I also got -7. Okay, so I subtracted 2 of the terms to see, did I get the same number in between? That is what told me that it was an arithmetic sequence. And because it's a negative, or because it's going down, remember that that's a -7. So now I got all the information that I need. Because it's an arithmetic sequence, we're going to do A sub n instead of G sub n. The first one, we're adding common difference times n minus 1. So now I'm going to fill in the blanks with the information I've got. That's the generic formula. So my A sub 1 in this case is 12.6 plus my common difference is a -7 times n, I kind of ran out of room there, sorry guys, times n minus 1. So you can see it's kind of out to the side, but that's okay. Another thing you could have done, some of you guys that have really good number sense and know that adding a negative is the same thing as subtracting, and you just from the get-go did -7 times n minus 1, that's okay. As long as you've got the right thing on there, I'm not going to be picky tomorrow, as long as it's obvious. Is that right up there? As long as it's obvious that you've got the right sequence written down, that's all we're looking for. Okay, for number 8, recursive formula is the one that's kind of a pain in the butt because it's not really good for much except for if you know the one before it. Okay, now you can tell from the pattern up here perhaps, even though they're fractions, don't let those fractions mess with you. The 3's are all the same, but you can tell, look what's happening here. You're just multiplying by 4 because 2 times 4 is 8, 8 times 4 is 32, so you can just continue the pattern that way. So my common ratio is 4. Because it's got a common ratio, that means it's geometric. The generic form of the geometric for a recursive, all of them are still G sub n. The only difference is that instead of using the first term in the sequence, you use the one that came before. So it's n minus 1, but you still multiply it by the common ratio. So in the recursive formula, you still have all the same pieces. In both types, you've got the n minus 1, you've got the common ratio. The difference is that when you've got a recursive formula, you have to know, oh, it's the one that came before it. And you're just going to do the ratio one time because you're just going to know the one before it. So that means that my formula is minus 1 times 4. And that's it. It didn't ask you for a specific term in the sequence, so you don't need it. So then by guessing and checking, or really what I did is I subtracted. I did negative 9 minus 20, or minus negative 20, and I saw that this was decreasing by 11. That was the difference between my two, that it was going down by 11 every time. So because it's going down by 11 or decreasing, it is an arithmetic, right? With a common difference. So my recursive formula it's the stupid one because you got to know the one before it. So it's just going to be a sub n minus 1 plus my common difference, which is negative 11. If you're better than I was at your age and you've got that good number sense and you realize that you can rewrite that adding a negative with subtraction, that's fine. Either one of those answers would be okay with me. So recursive, you're just saying take the one before it and add the common difference. Calculator. I'm going to remind you how to get the calculator to do all the work for you for this problem. Grab a calculator. If you don't have it, you need your calculator. Okay, so I've got my graphing calculator over here to the side. It's going to do all the work for me. All I have to do is type into the blank box in my calculator 5 times, so 5 times my common difference, and I'm going to put it, actually no, I don't even need to do that. So my common difference is 0.2. What button do I need to hit to get that little n minus 1 up? The caret, the arrow button, the up. It's lifting it up into the air. And because the question, I've blocked the question. What's it asking me for? The 5th term, right? Is that what it's asking me for? Because it's asking me for the 5th term in the sequence, then I need to do 5 minus 1. Because n minus 1 means what term number am I looking for? Minus 1. So I'm going to raise it to the 4th power if I'm looking for my answer. And I'm just going to hit equal. Calculator will do the work for you. 0.008. I am okay with you leaving it as a decimal. If you did decide to turn it into a fraction, remember what you do is you just hit math. And then option 1 is fraction. I get it's an accident. Just turn it off, honey. Okay, there we go. There's my fraction. Easy peasy. It's a good idea to know how to switch it back and forth just in case, because there is definitely a chance there will be some multiple choice on this test. So if it gives you a fraction, you need to know how to switch it back. So remember just the math button, option number 1. So this time, it's still just asking you for what the number of the term is. They've given you the equation to use. So we're asking for the 20th term. So we're simply going to take the formula that they gave us. We're going to do 5 plus 3. And if we're trying to find the 20th term, we're going to multiply it by 20 minus 1. So if we do 3 times 19, was that 48, right? And then, am I wrong? Oh, I'm wrong. Oh my gosh, what's wrong with me? It's 57. No, we're even close. Oh my gosh, I'm off. All right, even the best of us make mistakes. Okay, so then 5 plus 57 means that is going to be 62. So the 20th term in the sequence is 62. Okay, so for number 11, it says a bike rental company charges $12, which includes the first 30 minutes of biking. Okay, so you only have to pay a flat rate, apparently, of $12 for the first 30 minutes. Then after that, they charge you for 25 cents a minute. So they're charging you that $12, whether you keep it for 1, 2, 3 minutes, all the way up to 30. So it says represent the price for the first 5 minutes after that 30 minutes, okay? So what we mean by that is we're going to have to do the $12 that we pay for that first 30 minutes plus 5 minutes afterwards. So that's going to be 5 times 25 cents. Okay, is what the formula would be if it were asking you for a formula, okay? Now, what is it really asking me for in this particular question? It asked me for a numeric sequence. What's a sequence? What I just did right now is I just made a mistake that a whole bunch of people, when I taught this in the past, did wrong. Because every other question is like formula, 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 and you should know how to turn it into a formula. But what is that question actually asking you to do? Come up with the numbers, okay? I wanted to make sure that you guys saw so I just did some hard work there, and I'm not going to get it right because I didn't read the question. So make sure that you don't do that on Friday. It's good for you to know how to do the sequence, though, so I kind of want to leave that up there. So represent it as a sequence, and it says for the first 5 minutes afterwards. So first of all, you've got the $12 that you're going to pay. The next one, you're going to pay $12.25. Then you would pay $12.50. Then you would pay $12.75. 13. Now, here's the other thing I want to make sure. It says for the first 5 minutes after. So here's that 30 minutes. Have I done 5 more? Yeah, so I've left 1 off. So I left 1 part of the sequence off of there because it asks for the 5 extra minutes after the 30 minutes. So it's asking for the first 30, so that 12 plus 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 more should be after it. Of course, absolutely. That's the whole point of this because it says for the first 5 minutes after the 30. So it's like 30 minutes, like there's my 30 minutes. Plus, I need to have one for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 minutes after.
So you add a 0.25.
So I'm just adding 0.25 every time. Yep. And because it says write it as a sequence. It didn't say give me a formula. It just said write it as a sequence. Sequence just means give me the numbers in order. That's all it's asking. Okay. So I wanted to point that out to you. And then representing your sequence using a table of values. I didn't give myself enough room over to this side, so in case somebody's writing, I'm just going to put it over here. Okay, so the first 30 minutes is going to cost you 12, followed by 12.25. All of the numbers that we just wrote over here. What goes in the column on the left? Yeah, term number 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, and 6. Actually, there's 6 in there because I left 1 off. Okay, so you just term number is just the left-hand side of the column. So take it, put it in a table, do term number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That's it. Take those same numbers that you just found and put them into a table. Okay, because this could be a bonus. Okay, so I would be listening up. So remember your term numbers are right here. And then we had our 12, our 12.25, 12.50, 12.75, 13, and 13.25. What is the domain of this? First of all, what does domain mean? If you don't remember, you better know by Friday. Your x values. So which one of those numbers is my x? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay? So domain is x. Number 12 asks you, what does this represent, an arithmetic or geometric? And explain how you know. You should know just by looking at it. Because what does an arithmetic sequence look like? A straight line. It's linear. The whole point of adding the same number over and over and over again is that it gives you a constant rate of change. So for your reasoning, as long as I understand, so I would just say this is obviously geometric. And for a reason, I'm not asking you to write me a novel. You can just say not linear. I'd prefer for you to say linear than not a straight line personally. But I'm not going to be too mad at you, if you don't. So because 12 is geometric, because it's not linear, what does that tell you about B? It's arithmetic. And again, it's arithmetic because it's a straight line. Or linear. All you're going to be required to do is look at the shape and tell me one way or the other, just like those. Which one is it? Okay, for the last few, number 13, I believe, is the last one on this particular study guide. It says write a recursive formula. Okay, is recursive the stupid one or the good one? Stupid one. Okay, explicit is a better, to help you to remember the difference. It makes life a lot easier when people, have you ever heard the word explicit used outside of math class? Like he explicitly told me what to do. Like you're very clear. Okay? That's what explicit means. So it's kind of a better thing for people to be very clear and explicit than it is for them to be kind of vague and wishy-washy and all that. So recursive is the one that's not very clear, and that's why it's the one that's kind of lame. Okay? So you just have to know the one that comes before it. So I notice, actually B, we've seen B a couple of times. What's happening to get B? Yeah, the sign's changing and it's being multiplied by 5. That one keeps coming up. Okay, so because that one is geometric, the formula would be G sub n is equal to the one that came before it times the common ratio, which in this case is -5. Okay, that one, I noticed that -5 keeps coming up, so that's why my eye jumped to that one first. If B is geometric, then that tells you that A is probably arithmetic. I'm just going to go ahead and tell you now. If you have a pair of questions and you know one of them is one or the other one's going to be the other one. So even though I know these fractions kind of mess with us a little bit, you guys have a fraction button. Put it in your calculator. If you type in your calculator, okay, so fast forward, pretend I'm taking the test right now. I knew B was geometric, which I'm just going to go ahead and tell you means in a two-part question, A is going to be arithmetic. But I've got these fractions right here. Man, I don't want to try to figure out what that common difference is, but it's really easy because your calculator will do it for you. So I'm going to take -1/4 and I'm going to subtract -1/8 and figure out what did I add in between them. So let's remember how to do that. So in my calculator, I'm going to type open parentheses, the negative button. Okay, the negative button is the one right there next to the enter button, not the subtraction button. That'll make your calculator go bazooka and say math error. So hit negative. How do we do a fraction? 1 divided by 4. Close it. And then we need to subtract -1/8. Just like our warm-up today, you're subtracting a negative, okay? Don't just subtract 1/8. So that's going to be minus, because that time it is subtraction. Open parentheses, -1 divided by 8. And close it. Calculator is going to give me my common difference right there. What did it give me? -1.25. Let the calculator do the work for you. That's why we've spent so much time on it. So now I know my common difference for that one is -0.125. So that means my recursive formula will be A sub n is equal to the one that came before it minus 0.125. Because I realized I tried to smush too much in there. Okay, so if you can do all that sequence stuff, you're going to be just fine. On Friday, there's two parts, the function part and this part. Okay, so we did an excellent job on the first couple of questions. You guys definitely know the difference between an independent variable and a dependent variable. Okay, you guys all knew that the amount of how much the plant grew depended on how much water it received. So that meant that the plant's growth was the dependent variable. Okay, most of you guys did a really good job with that. And you knew that the water it received was the independent variable. The only thing was a couple of you guys when you were typing in your reasoning. Do you need another copy, ma'am? The only thing was your reasoning. So make sure you make your reasoning very clear. Okay? Growth depends on water. That's all you got to say. That's why the growth is the dependent variable. Okay, I'm not even going to do number 2 because we did. Domain is your X, range is your Y. So for domain, that means I need to start off by looking at where my X's go. So my X goes from all the way to that side to all the way to that side. So it goes all the way from 0. It just goes from the left side of the graph to the right side of the graph. So look at the scale, guys. The scale goes from 0 to 200 as you're going from left to right. So that means the domain is just from 0 to 200. If you look straight across the graph, your X value goes to the left at 0, goes all the way over to 200. So you can just write 0 to 200. Your range, of course, is your Y values. So now let's look at where our Y is. So the bottom of our graph is down here at 500. The top of the graph is up here at 2,000. So the range is from 500 to 2,000. So for the domain, you just need to look at how much it goes across. For the range, you need to look at see how much it goes up or down. Discrete, continuous. If we don't know this by now, OMG. Is that discrete or continuous? Continuous. You could draw it without picking up your pencil. I don't actually believe that anybody missed that one. I'm kind of on my way to doing letter C. Okay, letter C said identify the maximum point and explain what it means in terms of the situation. You guys did a good job of identifying the maximum point. Okay, the maximum point on the graph is right up here at this top at 2,000. So that part, you guys did a good job. It was 2,000 meters. Your reasoning was just a tiny bit off, though. Okay? Oh, I'll get you a copy of that, sir. I'm sorry. I realized that I didn't give that to you. Okay, so the reasoning, what's happening in this situation? It says altitude. What does altitude mean? Ruh-roh. How high up in the air you are. Exactly. So apparently this guy is hiking or something. Oh, it does say hiking trip, doesn't it? So he must be hiking in the mountains. Okay, so the highest altitude that he goes to is 2,000 meters right there in terms of the situation. So you could say, what probably happened when he got all the way to the top of the graph on his trip? Like, what probably happened? He stopped. How come he probably stopped? He's on a hiking trip. He's probably at the top, right? So if you say something like that, that's fine. You could say he's at the top of the mountain. You could say his highest altitude, okay? Because the actual graph says altitude. There's a few. Oh, I heard somebody say maximum. Good job, Dee. Okay, you could say his maximum height. There's several things that you could say, but don't just say, the highest point. Like, I need to know that you know that it's a person whose altitude is increasing because it specifically asks about the situation. Okay. Part D says increasing, decreasing, both, constant. What's happening there? It's increasing for the most part. It's increasing, increasing. Yep. And then we get that little nugget of constant right there in the middle where it's flat. So we need to write increasing and constant. If you only write one on Friday, you'll get a lot of your credit.
We already did a test like this.
You did. And what I'm doing is going over, because I have all your answers, so I'm going over the ones that people miss the most. Yep, that was why I did it, so that we're not spending time going over the ones we did. Awesome. You really killed this one. The only one that people missed a little bit was people missed B. And I'm not sure why. Okay, is B a function? It is a function. All your x's are different, folks. If all your x's are different, what do? You automatically assume that it's a function. Exactly. And then you guys did a great job with the graphs because you remembered it fails the vertical line test, so it's not that one was. And then C wasn't a function or because you had two inputs that went to the same output. But like I said, you guys did a great job with that one. Minimum, none of that. The fact that it asked you what's the function family that's a parabola. What's the one that's a parabola? Quadratic. What function family? You really didn't even need to worry about maximum, minimum of all that. It's the only one that's a parabola. Okay, number 6 was a toughie. And guys, your calculator will do number 6 for you. So that's why we're going to pull it up. Okay? So everybody grab your... Yeah, why is not? Mine's not working for some reason.
It is.
I know it's right there, but my little X isn't popping up for some reason. Is everybody else's popping up for them?
Yeah.
Okay, that's weird. There we go. Oh, yeah. So see where I've got like okay, so all I did was just type it into my calculator. For y equals negative 2.5, remember that's function notation. F of x just means the same thing as y equals. So once again, we're going to do y equals. I'm going to clear that other one out. I'm going to put in negative 2.5. No x this time. Yeah, it should be. So negative. There we go. Let's see what happens. And graph. Okay, whenever you don't have an x to it, it's flat. Because it's basically telling you y is 2.5 all the time. So negative 2.5. Yep, because see how it doesn't have an x with it this time? Okay, so what is that? Is that that's constant. Exactly. Yours isn't doing it? Okay, so any of these you guys can put in your calculator. So look at, now you guys do number 7, that A and that B. Well, actually, yeah, put in 7A and 7B. Type them into your calculator. Let's make sure that this is the part that we messed up a lot. And if we just type it in our calculator, we've got it. So do it with me. So that f of x, remember f of x is just another way of saying y equals, okay? So I'm going to type in y equals on my calculator. I'm going to clear out the one from before it. Now I'm going to type 2, my little alphabet soup button, 2x. How am I going to get that little exponent? My caret raised to the 2. Now, right now, see how my cursor is blinking in the exponent? So I got to hit the little right arrow to get it out of the exponent. And then hit plus 2x. Oh, I'm sorry, not 2x, is it? It's 4x. Oops. Okay, so plus 4x and then minus 3. So your calculator should look like mine by doing y equals 2x squared. Oh, great question. Minus 3 or negative 3? Minus 3. Because it's a, you did it right. because that's a subtraction problem. So click graph. What is that? That's a parabola, which means it's quadratic. So if it asks you what function family that is quadratic. So now you guys type that b in, 2 to the x power minus 3. Half your test, as long as you type it in your calculator right, it's going to give you the answer.
What is a parabola?
A parabola, which is quadratic. See where it asks you which function family? So now everybody do your y equals, clear out what you got in there again. 2 raised to the alphabet soup. Make sure you hit your arrow to the right to get it out of the exponent. And then it's still minus 3. That's not a negative 3, although you wouldn't know it because I just hit negative for some reason. Minus 3. Make sure yours looks like mine. And click graph. What is that? Exponential. It ain't linear. It sure ain't quadratic. Or absolute values. That's exponential. Okay, type number 8 in there. 8A. This was the part that, man, we bombed this part. So we're going to fix it before we get out of here today. Number 8 says type in f of x, and then I'm going to do so 1 divided by 4. Close it. And then just hit the little alphabet soup. Graph. Okay, this time it's asking whether it has a maximum or a minimum. So look at the shape of the graph. It's going up and it's going to keep going up. Is that ever going to stop? That's part of a linear. It doesn't actually have a maximum. Whenever it's linear like that, so that you have the arrows on either side of it, it doesn't have a maximum or a minimum. Because that straight line's just going to keep on going. Okay, last but not least, that absolute value equation. That was the one, and we're going to have perfect timing too, because we'll get this done before it's time to go to lunch. And we'll be done. So y equals, clear it out, 2. Who remembers how to get to the absolute value?
You do like the second button and then you press catalog, which is a 0.
Okay, so second, and then the 0 button, because you want what's above the 0 that says catalog. That's like the math catalog. Absolute value is the first one. Click enter. Now I'm going to type a little alphabet soup button to get the X in there. I'm going to scroll over to the right to make sure I get out of the absolute value, because that minus 4 is outside of it. So 2. Does everybody see how I got to that catalog, how we got to the absolute value? Okay, yes, ma'am. Okay, yeah, hang on one second. So that's what it looks like. Does it have a maximum or a minimum? It's got a minimum because it's got a bottom. It's got a base, so that's got a minimum. Okay, those were the most missed